we are continuing the exercise, and this is the second part of activity where we have to create a function called isValidID, and then it's requested that we validate the ID according to these rules set. So we would go back to our code and we would do the following. We'll put in the function isValidID, which is part of the process. And we would say if isValidID, so that should give us a true or false answer. And if it gives us a true answer, we should continue with the rest of the functions. Otherwise, we're just going to say show message incorrect ID. So therefore, we put up the function isValidID and we put it as a Boolean. Right, Control-Shift-C. Let us take a look at what we need to do. First of all, it should consist of 13 digits. So therefore, we first need to check to see if it's 13 digits. So I'm going to put here a small Boolean is valid, and I'm going to make it Boolean. What this is going to do, it's going to check for everyone. For everything, if it's valid somewhere along the line, if it becomes false, and then we stop the coding. So we're going to put it as we need to check two things. First of all, it consists of 13 digits. If it does, we continue. If it's not, we stop. But if it consists of 13 digits, then we do the second part. So we're going to take an assumption that B is valid, we set to true. And now we're going to say there the following. If, and now we look at the length of our S or our ID. In this case, our ID at the top, we're looking to see if that is 13 characters. So SID, we're looking for SID. If SID is at least 13 characters, and it must be exactly 13 characters. So we can say there, if that doesn't equal to 13, then we're going to say there, our B is valid equals false. Else, we're going to continue with the program. And the program should continue by now checking for this part here, which is the 13-digit check code. We have to do a certain set of steps here, and if all those steps are correct, then it's valid. So we would start here with a begin, and it would put in the end for us. So here, you're going to check the digits of the ID. Right, so let's start with that. Now, the first thing that we need to do, add all the digits in the odd positions, excluding the last digit. So they give us an ID there, so we need to check that's digit 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10. And then we have to do something with the even digits. Right, so let's just start with that one and deal with that one. We're going to create a local variable, and I'm going to call it odd numbers. And I'm going to make that integer, because we have to add up all the odd numbers. Okay, so for this whole thing, I'm going to say for I loop equals 1 to 12. Because we're checking the last digits. So I have to check the first 12 digits. Now I'm going to say here, there's a nice function called odd. If odd, I loop. So if that is true, then it's an odd number. If that is false, then it's an even number. So I'm going to say if odd, So that's the odd part. So what do we need to do with the odd part? We have to say, so this is the odd part. So we have to take the odd numbers and we have to add whatever was in odd numbers previously plus, and now we're going to copy the next number from SID, comma, starting where I loop is for 1. And remember, this is a string, so string to int of that whole thing. And here, before we increment, we have to initialize odd numbers set to 0 beforehand. Now we have to do it, apologies, now have to do it for the even numbers, but the even numbers work slightly different. What we have to do, we have to concat the even numbers together. So the only way we can do that is by having that as a string. So if I go back here to my variables, I'm going to put the even numbers, and I'm going to create a string for that. And I'm also going to say even numbers, two single inverted commas, I initialize here for both of them. So for the even numbers now, we're going to say even numbers colon equals even numbers plus copy out of SID starting at the I loop position for 1 character. Right, so that's where we break them up. We break them up into odds and evens. So for the odd, what do we have to do? We have to add all the digits in the odd positions. We have to add them up. How do we add them up? By creating an integer value, and as we go through the loop, we add them all up. What do we have to do with even integers? We have to concatenate them together at this stage. That's all we're doing. We're just doing this part here and this part there. That's what we did. Only those two. We haven't done the multiplied by 2 yet. Right, we'll do that just now. Right, so that is our for do loop. There, we start with our for do loop, so we add to the odd and to the even. So after that, still as pod, this is the end of check our digits. After this part, so we're going to loop from 1 through to 12. So after that part, we're now going to do the even numbers, because we have to take the even numbers and multiply that with 2. So we took the even numbers. Now I'm going to leave it as a string at this stage, but I'm going to write the number there, doing the following. So even numbers, I'm set, do the following. Take the even numbers. Remember now it's a string. So I'm going to put there in front of it, string to int of your even numbers. Right? Multiply that with 2. And the answer you take back to a string. So int to string of that one. So I'm taking the numbers, I'm converting it to an int, I multiply it with 2 and I take it back. Right, so what we need to do now, we need to add them up here. Because now it says there, and this is why I kept it as a string, because now we have to take each one for one and add them up. The only way to do that is through a loop again. Right, so let's do that. So I'm going to create a variable called I sum, and I'm going to say I sum colon equals 0. I apparently didn't create properly there at the top, so I'm just going to put the I sum integer. And now I'm going to loop, so I'm going to say for I loop equals 1 to the length currently of even numbers. Right, and all I'm going to say is I sum colon equals I sum plus string to int of, and now I'm going to copy out of even numbers where I loop is currently for 1 character. So that's what I have to do there. So that takes care of the following. That takes care of that part there and that part. They add up the digits of the numbers created from the event or from the even digits. So we add them together. Now we do this one. Add answer 2 to answer 1. So I'm going to create something of a variable that says add answers, which I'm going to make integer. And now I'm going to say, remember we did the odd numbers, so I'm going to say add answers equals our odd numbers plus our I sum for the even numbers. So it's the odd plus the even. So that takes care of that one. Add answer 2 to answer 1. Now subtract the second digit, in this case that one, from the number of 10. The number must be the same as the last. So let's do that part first. Let us subtract the second digit from 10. So we need to get what is the second digit at this particular stage. There's ways and means to do it. I tend to use string copying. So I'm going to put there, I'm going to create a variable. Let's see if they want to do it this time correctly. I'm going to create an I digit, which is an integer. Did it do it? Nope. Apparently you can do it this way. I digit, which make integer. So the I digit is going to be this. I digit, this is this part which we're working out now. Subtract the second digit. We're trying to get that part there. Get the second digit. So I'm going to make there from int to string. I'm going to take add answers. So I'm converting that to a string. From that, I'm going to copy the second digit for 1 digit. But that is currently a text. So I have to make from string to int the whole thing. Do you see how am I doing this step for step? I'm doing 3 things into one, but there's 3 steps here. There's, first of all, I'm taking that to a string. Then I'm copying the second digit. And then I'm converting that back to an integer. And that gives me the digit. And now I'm going to say I digit colon equals 10 minus what is in I digit. That value, if this value is now the same as that last value, it means it's valid. Otherwise, it is invalid. Right, so now we're going to check if, and I'm going to do this int to string of I digit. We take a look at our digit. If that is the same, so we're going to copy from a SID starting at position 13 for one digit. If that is not the same, so therefore if that is not the same, then it means our B is valid equals false. So that's the end of the check digit. So we've got two checks. We're first checking to see if it's 13 digits. If it's not 13 digits, then we do this particular part. If that is correct, then we can say result colon equals B is valid. And now all that we have to do is to run our code, because we've already put it in there. If is valid. Is valid is our function to check the digits. So let's run it and see. Okay, so analyze the ID number, which works, but if we change this something to maybe a 6, then it tells us incorrect ID, because is valid here is returning to us a false, and it will be that one. So it ran through all of this code for the is valid. It looked first to see if it's 13 digits. If that was correct, then it looked for the rest.